So now we're looking at consumer credit. This is 4-5 for our assignments. And I just wanted to go over a little bit. I know we have a list of all this information. I put this in the Nearpod on Schoology, but I just wanted to go over a few things. So when you get a credit card statement at the end of your statement cycle, whenever that is, whether it's the 1st through the 30th or 1st through the 31st or some other random number of 30 or 31 months or 31 days, you're going to get a list of all the transactions that have transpired in that time frame. There'll be some information about who you are, right? Jane Sharp, your address, your account number, which is pretty important to have. It'll show when the billing date occurred, and it'll show when your minimum payment due is, and I think that's pretty important. Then we have these transactions. Again, these are the dates that these transactions occurred. They're pretty accurate only as long as the merchant that the card was used to purchase something at, as long as that happened in real time, meaning they had a good connection to the data to move it to your credit issuer. But then there's the payment, which is really money that we've taken out. So we're going to go through these, right? We got a 75, a 31, 139, 38, and then a negative 75. Again, with a debit account, like your savings account, your checking account, negatives are not good. That means money going out. But again, we're talking about the reverse side. So in this account, negatives are good because a balance is money that you owe. It's money that you have to then pay back. So when we talk about the negative, that's making that payment off. And you can see that's happened right there. So we have a previous balance of 150 and 50 cents. We have new purchases. If you add up all of these purchases, ignore that 75 for now. If you add all of those up, you're going to get a total of 284. Again, we are adding to their balance. These are purchases that you have paid out or made at various locations, pizza shops, department stores, bookstores, whatever. And that's going to give you a new balance. Of course, then we're also going to be subtracting off a $75 credit, so I guess we should make sure we incorporate that into here. And that end of the day balance is almost complete. Subtract this, add that, but we also need to account for this finance charge. Again, that finance charge was found by taking our average daily balance and multiplying it by the monthly rate. So again, we could try that, just check and see. So 235 and 10 cents. Our monthly rate is 0.015, and that gives us $3 and 52.65 cents. They're going to round to the nearest penny. There's that 353. Again, the average daily balance was calculated just like we did in 4-4 when we talked about weighting all of the balances throughout the month or throughout that billing cycle, and then averaging them out so that the longer durations of small balances or long balances had an appropriate weight. So when we take that out, and I guess we should probably go ahead and include that in here, the negative or the positive 353. At the end of the day, this should equal 3, oh, I had it right. Sometimes you second guess yourself in math. People do it more often than not. So we're going to take that 150.50. We're going to add up all of those values. I'm going to go ahead and just add up the total that they've given us, but later we'll go ahead and look at them to make sure they do add up. 284.45. Then we're going to subtract 75, and we're going to add the $3.53, and our total is 363 and 48 cents. Notice, I'll get another color here so we can really see it. Notice, there's your new balance. So again, we can look at all the different, all this information can be found on this statement that we receive from credit card company. And there's lots of information that can be found on there, but we've kind of gone over the main ones. One thing we do want to consider is this, right? Because that's how we determine the average daily balance. If we wanted to go and look at what our actual balance was each day, for the month, we could then multiply that back 235.10 times 30 and say that's our total month if we were to multiply all of our transactions or how long they were. And we can again look at that, right? We started at 150 and 50 cents, and assuming we started on the first of the month, which again we don't have that information in here just yet, but then we would know that we have this 150. It happened for one day, and then on day 2 we made a purchase of 75, and day 3 we made a purchase for 31.85. We waited 2 days, we waited 3 more days, we waited 11 days here, and so we could look at what our balances are for each of those days. So for the first day we were at 150 and 50 cents times 1 day. Day 2 we made a purchase, it was only that day that we had it, so now we're sitting at 225 and 50 cents, right? But it's still just the 1 day sitting at this total. And we can do exactly what we did in the previous problem where we went through, and I guess as a recall, that scenario there. That was the thing we were working on last time. Now we're looking at this piece here and saying, okay, what do we have? Going forward, here's another example of this one. So it's got the same information as we had. We were talking about explaining how to find the new purchases or how it was determined. Again, we used this table here, and we took and said, starting with our 150 and 50 cents, let's add 75. We're going to add 31.85 and continue with those, and then subtract off the 75 payment. And as you can see, that's going on here. New purchases was the 284.45. When we take this, subtract the payments that we make to pay off the card. Again, negatives are good for credit cards because that means money is going back into the account. The number is going down. We owe less. New purchases, finance charge, no late charges. This is our new balance. And again, we just determined that in that previous problem. So it's important to note, again, just like we did with average daily balance, we're making transactions. They're posting to our account. We're going to go and look at through all of these, how long they're there, what date they came in on. And then again, with a deposit account, checking, savings, CDs, all of those accounts, money going in is good. Money going out is bad. Not necessarily bad, but it means the account's going down in value. There's less in there. With a credit card, money going down is good. That means the balance is being paid down. Because again, we talk about average daily balance times, or is taken and multiplied by your monthly rate. So the bigger that average daily balance is, the more your fee is going to be, your finance charge, your interest. And so when you pay down the balance, you're making that average daily balance smaller, and then consequently receiving a smaller interest or finance charge that you then have to pay. Again, imagine that we didn't have any payment in the account, no $150.50 to start, it was all clean and in the clear. We would have a significantly smaller balance. Instead of sitting at the 363, we'd be less than $300. And so our new balance would be less to pay off altogether. But also importantly, the interest is based off of, again, we talk about this rate here, this average daily balance, would be a smaller number as well because we don't have that 150 sitting on there for a day. That's going to reduce what's overall owed to the card, which is going to reduce the fee that we actually pay. So again, I hope this helps a little bit with understanding what the average daily balance is. This is really how credit card issuers, banks, or just people that are exclusively in the credit card side do to determine how much you owe. The more you pay off, the more often you pay off, the smaller that is, the less that fee is. You can have that fee down to zero. That's still okay. In fact, that's better than okay. It's one less thing that you have to worry about, right? So if your car breaks down and you're sitting at the max for the credit card, what are you going to do? You can't use that credit card anymore. It's there for emergencies. Remember, as I said in class, when a credit card becomes an extension of your income instead of a reflection of your income, that's a problem. It's useful in emergencies, but it's not ideal to have something sitting outstanding. Now, one can argue, hey, you know what? That's my choice. That's what I want to use my money for. That's great. But if you look at the national deficit and you look at the average Americans who still have student loans or credit card debt, and you look at the number of people who foreclosed in their homes during any kind of a credit crisis, you'll start to realize, oh, maybe Mr. Clark knows what he's talking about. Maybe we should be a little more careful so that when the worst comes to worst, we're ready to handle it. Because if you're already sitting treading water and the flood comes, you're going to be in a whole world of hurt versus if you're sitting in a boat with a nice view of the rainbows. You're going to be a lot better when that rain comes. So, hey, soapbox aside, I hope this helps. If you have questions, please let me know. But in general, I feel like this lesson isn't too bad. We're going to look on a couple more things here in a minute, but this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're doing here. So let's go ahead and take a look at what else we have and see if there's anything else that we really need to focus on before we cut this loose. So I guess I do want to go into this one just a little bit. I think it might be helpful only because one of the things we talk about in our, I guess, vocab was different, different rules or acts that are in place to help protect consumers. In this one, we're going to talk about the Fair Credit Billing Act, which just means that if the bank makes a mistake, you don't have to pay that mistake. So if they're asking you to pay too much or they're not reflecting your charges that you've paid appropriately, then you have time to take care of it. Most banks aren't going to want to deal with this liability, right? Because they don't want that on their hands anyways. But mistakes happen. They are, in fact, people working at banks, not robots most of the time. I mean, sure, maybe the robot does some of the heavy lifting, but there's still people involved in that process. So Myrna is examining the summary section of her credit card statement. She's checked all the entries. The issue that she's having is that everything checks out except the new balance seems off. So if you take your, let's see here, make sure we're on the right one. Yep. You take your 1748, you add the 800, add the 915, add the 1900. That makes sense. So when you take this 1748, you take what? 1748 even, and again we'd be subtracting $100, so that'd be 1648 and some change. We're going to add new purchases of $800 even, so we're sitting at now what, 2448 even. We've got a late charge, which is $9.15, and a finance charge of 19, so 28.15. And so now when we look at this, zoom out a little bit. When we look at this and we say, oh, we've got all this information here. We should be 24.76 and 15 cents, but we're sitting at 25. And so now we think to ourselves, well, what's the difference? It looks to be $100. The first thing I would do is, one, look at my payments and my purchases and say, are either of these $100? And we have one right away. Right, easy. That was not what I wanted. There we go. Easy. But again, if we were to go look at the purchases, oh, I don't have it up there. But if you're going to look at the purchases, if we had our purchase section that showed everything that we did in our billing cycle, we could then look and say, well, was 800 really how much was supposed to come out? Was the number different? And then we could figure it out from there. But luckily for us, we can see $100 sounds to be like this credit wasn't actually applied. And that Fair Credit Billing Act, we just have to notify the creditor in writing 60 days from the statement that bill's an issue. And I honestly wouldn't pay it until that was resolved, or pay the real amount. But usually you should just contact your creditor and say, hey, look, this is off. Do you want me to pay the whole thing now and you credit me back? Or do you want me to pay you just that amount or wait for a new bill? They'll usually have some direction on what they want to do depending on how soon it was after the cycle. They might just issue it in the next cycle, and adjust your bill accordingly. So instead the next month of, let's say, 1,500, you only have to pay 1,400, something like that. That's all going to be dependent on what they do. But ultimately, that problem isn't much different than the last one. So again, if we think about this, all we're doing is saying what's our previous balance, subtract any payments, we're going to add any new purchases, and I should say, actually now that I think about it, I should say it says payments or credits. So if they decided to issue a credit for that $100 into the next cycle, that's what that might be a scenario of what that is. If they realize there was an error, they might add $100 in there. You might also see a credit show up if you returned an item. So you bought something online on Amazon and then it showed up 3 days later, there was an error, you sent it back, they said they'd refund your account. You would see then a pending credit for your account for the amount of that purchase. If they agreed to pay your shipping, all that stuff, it would be all factored in, baked into that amount. So credits to an account do the same mathematical effect as a payment does, but where they come from again is more when the issuer of credit, the lender, that credit card company says, oops, we messed up. We shouldn't have charged that amount. We didn't charge that amount, or sorry, we shouldn't have charged too much, or we didn't credit what we were supposed to before. We took too much out. You returned an item. All those things fit in that window. In general, though, that's really the most we're going to deal with in this section. Next week, we'll be focusing more on the last piece, which is looking at a calendar and figuring out our average daily balance based on how many days. I'm going to do a video on that one because I think the walkthrough helps. It helped my classes last year as they kind of figured out how many days was I sitting at this balance and when do I start counting ahead to my next balance. So if you have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, until next time, have a good day.